Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Eniela Jose. The traditional family structure that once consisted of a man, a woman, and children is shifting in today's world. Some argue we should embrace this shift. Others say the change is not a positive one. They cite high divorce rates, single parenting, and teen pregnancy as reasons why. And most recently, we've been introduced to a new controversy, same-sex marriage and gay parents who wish to adopt. CSUN students say they know the definition of family has changed.
Either the wife's cheating on the husband or the husband's cheating on the wife and people don't stay together anymore, and there's kids going out to, doing drugs and getting arrested, and there's no morals anymore in society.
As long as you love who you love and you love your children and you love your family, that's all that really matters. Now there's not a traditional family because there's so many different types of families.
These days, I think most families are divided, a lot of loss of father figures, and I think families are generally separated more than a traditional family.
With the divorce rates being over 60%, it seems like today the typical family would be someone who's gone through a divorce, maybe even a blended family. Children from other marriages, a couple from a different marriage get together.
On Point's Kira McKibbens has more on this story.
Thank you, Aniela. Today I have here with me Father Lima. He's an associate pastor at St. Mel Catholic Church. And I also have with me Dr. Alice Berkowitz. She's a clinical and forensic psychologist, and she's based out of Beverly Hills. Thank you guys for coming. So I have a question for both of you, but I want you to start, Doctor. So what is the origin of traditional marriage? Where did it start from?
Well, the origin of traditional marriage came out of the agricultural society and the need for property and to be able to basically feed the families, to feed the tribes. And at that point, marriage was basically about the ownership of property, supporting an agricultural society. It wasn't about love. It was about the women stayed home and took care of the children. The men went into the field. It very much mirrored the animal world in many ways. It has shifted dramatically over the years, of course, but it was based in a practical need to maintain life and continuity and to procreate.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I can only add to it, but augment it also from a religious point of view, because that's what I'm wearing at the moment. But I think it's there is also the word traditional marriage itself. Those two words itself have to be qualified a bit. For example, the word marriage is for all practical purposes, at least historically, a religious word. Always it was a society that was able to do that, always accompanied with some religious elements to it. Traditional marriage, it depends on who you're asking, because if you look at traditional marriage from a Muslim point of view, it's 4 wives. You look at from an Orthodox Mormon, it's many. So in that sense, it has to be a little more qualified. However, that being said, as a believer, marriage has a definitive role, not only economically, a unit of society, etc., but also it has a mystical, theological role, and it goes back once again to the Bible. Again, the story of Adam and Eve it's a myth. The story of Adam and Eve, myth does not mean falsehood.
Kidding.
Yeah, it's not a falsehood. A myth means a story expressing a truth. Okay, there's no Mr. Adam, Miss Eve. Okay, and so, but the truths are very specifically mentioned, and God made them male and female. The two shall become one, and etc., etc. It goes on that way, and so that has evolved, as the doctor said here, over the centuries, agrarian, depending on the tribes, depending on various factors. And it has it is percolated to the values we have today.
Well, speaking of you talked about roles. Well, what roles did the men and women play in those that family structure?
As, again, once again, most of the roles in those days, society was a patriarchal society. You had men that seemed to dominate a lot. Women, unfortunately, were seen as a lesser, or at least owned by like as they were property. Unfortunately, it still exists in some places, that attitude. But personally, I like coming from India myself, I like the Indian aspect, where they call the man is the master of the house, but the woman is the goddess of the house, at whose feet even the man worships.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I guess, I look at things a little bit differently, of course. I know certainly it was a patriarchal society at one point, especially when it was agricultural, because the men were stronger. The women worked in the fields. The whole goal was survival and procreation of the species. I think what happened as we moved along in society, and particularly with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, things seemed to change dramatically. People didn't have to be as bound together. They could be more separate. Family units separated. People moved across the world. Communication was much more easy. And I think the whole notion of marriage changed. We still had arranged marriages. They started to change to the notion of love. We started to come out of the Victorian era, which changed things dramatically as well. And I think what's happened probably over the last 100 or so years is we've had the breakdown of the family, the breakdown of the extended family, which has left a lot of people feeling very alone, not as connected to their extended family and relatives. They don't have the same caregivers. Roles have shifted within families. There's been a lot more disillusionment.
Support systems. No?
There's been a lot more disillusionment.
Very true, all over the world.
Divorce is probably at the greatest high we've ever seen it at. It's at least 55% all over the country. In California, it's 65%.
And I think also that the family has, particularly in the last few decades, has strongly been influenced by so many other factors. They used to say that your immediate family raised the children about 50 to 60% of the time, and society raised the remaining part of that time. Now, I think, I don't have any statistics on that, but I suspect society is raising the children, but 70% of the time, with all the influences, the ambiance, the messages that come through, and the immediate family is not that way. And so we have this tremendous imbalance that is there, which results in disconnectedness, fracturedness, and the unit of society is going down. It's like how the cell in the body, think of society as a body. If the cell deteriorates, the whole body is diseased. So if our society is having problems today, it is our families are having problems.
Well, Doctor, I want to ask you, in terms of children, how did this type of family, the family that wasn't based off of love, it was based off of money and values, how did that affect children?
You mean years ago?
Yeah, years ago.
Well, I don't necessarily think it was as supportive and nurturing of children. I think it hit a lot. I think what we've come to see is that wasn't that all of a sudden we have enormous, such a greater extent of psychopathology and depression. It was hidden. Do we see was there incest back then? Yes. We had sexual abuse. It was hidden. Today, we have new kinds of families evolving. We have lots of women that are having children on their own. We have same-sex families. We have parents that never got married but are having children together. We have a lot of divorces. And we have the nuclear family that's struggling to stay together.
True.
Yeah, it is.
No, I agree. I think, though, the society is changing so drastically today, and families are left helpless to cope with what's going on. And we've not yet reached that mound of how to deal psychologically with the current situation, because in our minds, or perhaps somebody will say it's in our DNA, to think of the family as the traditional mom, dad, children. And if it is changing fast, we are not equipped yet to deal with any other variation. Therefore, we find fractured families, no communication. And there's another factor that we have to keep in mind is affluence. You know, more and more couples are having only 1 or 2 kids. Never used to be that way. They needed the kids for social security, for help on the fields, for all of that. But now with affluence, the birth rate is dropping. And more parents are having families later, children later. And so all of that plays a factor in the psychosexual development of the child, you know, the relating to, in that sense.
I think that's why what we have now is really, that's come to the fore, is attachment theory and how critical it is. Because the ability for a parent to attach to a newborn baby and to be able to have a strong, secure attachment with that child is really the strength we have today, that as psychologists we know if we look for anything, that's the one thing we have to foster, no matter what the family looks like on the outside. But that there has to be the ability for the main parent or both parents to be able to attach from a very early age and to create a sense of security and safety and the ability to...
But do women don't do that anymore?
I think women, a lot of women do that. I think there are times where we have women at times are the primary workforce and that the men have to take it over. You know, there's a guy by the name of Daniel Siegel who writes a lot about newborn babies and attachment. And, you know, he was the first person who brought us kind of out of our Middle Ages, who said, you know, when an infant is born and, you know, is first delivered, that infant will turn both to the mother's voice and the father's voice, and that is so crucial. Now, does the mother play the primary role of attachment? Hopefully there will be one parent that will play it, especially during the early years, and hopefully it'll be the mother with breastfeeding. But I've seen lots of times where the mother is absent and the role is given over to the father or someone else who is able to meet that child's cues and the child can have a very successful life. I think it's about stability and listening to children and getting to know your children and trying to mold the society as it changes.
See, one of the challenges we have, I think, we have in the church, for example, and I'm sure society has the same challenge. On one side, you have to hold to the ideal. What is the best for this couple, best for the children, and best for society, the ideal. On the other side, you have to deal with the real. And so how do you, sometimes these don't meet. And that's the challenge that is there. That's the challenge of without compromising the ideal, how do you deal with the real? You know, because these things are happening, because people call, they come for counseling, they want to talk to you, and then sitting back, you can look and see beyond what they're going through, but then what do you tell them? Because they're already caught into that little framework that they can't get out of.
So I see that you both agree it did change. So when do you think this change happened? Around what time?
I'm not saying that the change is good. I'm just saying, yes, we agree that the change happened. Yeah.
So when did we see this change in the family structure? When did the change in marriage happen? When did you see it happening? Either one can grab that question.
I think it's changed over the hundreds of years. I think, you know, with the Industrial Revolution, we saw changes. We saw with the world wars, with people immigrating to the United States, it's changed. With women getting the right to vote, it changed. With the roles starting to change in the 50s and the 60s, again, of women and men, it's changed. With gay marriage, it's changed. With the divorce rate, it's changed. I don't think it's changed at one time, but I think it's a period that's happened over many hundreds of years.
But at the same time, the change is happening in Western societies, okay? In the Eastern societies, for example, in Asia, India, there is change happening because of the same reasons, but it takes on a whole different aspect. For example, again speaking as in India, from India, basically, the extended family is still there. Values are still there. People, when a couple gets married, it's not the man and woman getting married, it's two families that get married to each other, and that's still there. And there is affluence, there is all of these, but each society is dealing with it in slightly differently. For example, in Japan, now we can't go to China because of the restrictions there, but in Japan, they still have values. The Japanese values are there. Certainly in India, those values are still there. But so when we speak of this change that is coming across, I think it's getting rapid here in the West, more than anywhere else. And I think there are other factors for it.
So why do you think it's changed so drastically here?
I suspect only because we have lost, and this might sound a little bit redundant or so, but it coming from a man of the cloth, I think in the West, personally, we have lost the sense of the sacred. If you ask anybody today what is sacred, they will not know how to answer. They will answer in terms of what is meaningful or what is significant, but what is sacred? In the old days, those were very clear. Country was sacred. I mean, you dared not desecrate the flag. As sacredness, parents were sacred, family was sacred, God was sacred. We've lost that today. And so lots of things are being lost in that whole, almost like a tsunami, that we've lost sense of sacred. And I think this is part of it. It's one tiny factor, but I really feel that's a very strong thing.
So, Doctor, do you feel that gender roles and this shift within gender roles has anything to do with the way the family structure is?
The shift in gender roles, not completely. Does it have to do with the change in how the family structure? It certainly is affecting the family structure. You might have a mother that's working, a father that's home. You might have two mothers. You might have two fathers. But I think the value system is still the value system of the people. And I do believe something as sacred is lost. I'm not so sure that it's the traditional. Of course, we'd all like to still believe in the mother-father fairy tale. Unfortunately, we don't live that. And I think when you have incidents like 9/11 happen, and our basic value system and everything we thought we were safe in this country starts to fall apart, that changes things dramatically again. But I certainly do see a change in terms of gender roles and gender differences and same-sex marriages and how that is affecting children. And
but often economy plays a role too. No more can a family sustain themselves on one salary. You almost have to have two salaries, which means both have to go to work. It affects family, it affects children, the way they're raised, latchkey kids, all of that. So the economy also plays a major role in how, and some parents make a courageous decision to forego some comforts to give their emphasis to the kids, at least in the earlier years. But that's a major factor, particularly in the West. Economy plays such a major role. And let's face it, we have a leaning towards what is fun and what is good, and meaning what could be something great in terms of enjoyment and pleasure. And so we find families sacrificing children, having children, because they want to postpone it, because they want to save money on a cruise, they want to do stuff, they want to do other things. So the priority has shifted a bit. Yes, eventually, of course, there are children. But there's a slight shift in that. That's what I mean by sacred. If you look at movies, the old movies, the 20s and 30s, when the couple meet and they're talking, they always talk about their children, or what their children are going to be like. Always those factors come in the screenplay, in the script, about their kids. You never hear that today in any movies, about what their kids are going to be like. you know.
You certainly heard it in families, though.
In family, I'm talking about, but it's a sort of a little bit of a reflection in that sense, you know. So there is a little, this shift again is moving in a direction, and we, particularly as clergy people, we're struggling to maintain that balance.
And in terms of the shift, let's go ahead and bring it to the 21st century. So we're seeing new families, we're seeing non-traditional families evolving. Yes. So are these type of families working? We have single-parent homes.
They do. Many of them do with great difficulty. You know, there's Holy Family. We have a feast on a Holy Family, and we say, what is a Holy Family? What makes a family holy? You know, because the family is no more father, mother, children, as you said. Mm-hmm. You know, you have mom living with their with the daughter, you have, you know, same-sex couples, you have people living alone or roommates, and so what is a family anymore? And that is the major question that we have to ask. And
one family that we really want to give attention to that's been in the media a lot is the gay parenting. What is wrong with this family, or is there anything? What does this type of family offer to children?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think what gay families are up against is society. But I've seen lots of children raised in same-sex homes, and as long as the parents are mentally healthy and their values are in the right place, I think the children can deal with the outside influences very well. If you come up against two people, however, that are not mentally healthy, just as that would be the case in a straight couple, that's when you're going to have problems. And I think what happens with two gay parents is then you have the prejudices that they run into in schools or outside in the world. But to be honest, I've seen a lot of kids come out of those families where it's either two fathers, two mothers, and they have a feeling of loss at times, of not having the other sex parent, especially if they had two mothers and they're boys, or two fathers and there's a girl in the family. But as long as the family communicates, and as long as there is a strong sense of attachment and safety, I really believe they can get through anything.
For me, the issue, though, of same-sex marriage, other than the morality issue, etc., I keep that aside, is basically in the way it's currently addressed. Now, you know, not the word civil union, but the word marriage. Those are the issues at the moment. Because civil unions, they have all the rights. People seem to have rights. But it's the terminology. And my fear is that somehow, in saying that a child raised by a man and a woman is the same as of two men or two women, is equating the genders. Gender becomes irrelevant legally. And that, to me, is the problem.
And you actually, you responded to an article in the LA Times where you said that advocates confuse the difference between equality and sameness. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, basically, that's what we are saying. We are saying a man and a woman is same. If a man and a woman, if two men raise a child, and we say that the child is the same as if a man and a traditional couple, then we are saying that they're the same. A man and a woman is the same as a man and a man, or a woman. And if we say that, we are saying, therefore, a woman can be replaced by a man, or a man can be replaced by a woman, because they are the same. And that's the problem.
No, I do agree. I mean, I don't think you can replace you can't have two male parents and not have a female influence and have it not affect the children. I mean, I don't see any gross pathology, but men and women are different, and they're going to bring different things into a relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have a responsibility to teach people how to cope with it, how to extend their family structures to aunts and uncles and people that will be involved.
So my issue was the legal aspects of it. The moment you say it legally, that this is the same, then it has other repercussions later on, down the line. You know.
Well,
but you're right. I think the realities, the children are there. You know, I married a couple, a boy to his girlfriend. We had a wedding, and he was raised by a same-sex couple. And I did the wedding. You know, the wedding of the boy and his girl, his fiancée. So, and I see that he seems to be healthy enough. You know, he seems to get the kid. But I can see what you're also saying, that there is that need for it. And my fear in this particular situation, since you brought it up, the current situation, is the legal aspects of it.
And with all that being said, I want to go into my final question, and I want both you guys to answer it. So what direction do you see the family and marriage heading in the next few years? And go ahead and take a minute each, if you like.
Well, I think, though, for me, if we can teach our families, no matter what kind of family, what love really means. You know, because often we have devalued the word love. We say, I love to eat, I love to drink, I love my pet, I love my car, I love God. We use the same word, and we've devalued it. But if you truly take from, again, the biblical sense of what love really means, it's total self-giving. If we can teach people that message, total self-giving, when a man tells a woman, I love you, or vice versa, and it's total self-giving to the other person, then there is hope.
And to finish off with you.
Well, I would love that to be
True.
a reality,
Oh, yeah, no,
but I would probably focus more on the word of generosity. I think where we're going is that we're going to see a lot of different kinds of families. And I think as a society, we need to hold them in respect, and we need to treat the parents as if we would treat any parent, and the children in particular, to not create any more trauma, but to help them adapt and to try to establish a greater sense of community again. And I think people are moving back towards that.
Okay. And so I want to thank both you guys for coming. Father Lima, Dr. Berkowitz, thank you guys so much. I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you. It's been delightful.
Packers,
Vikings, Red State, Blue State.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
But when we live united, we create real lasting change in the education, income, and health of our country.
United.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
We would all like to thank you for watching On Point. If you would like to see more of this, you can follow us on Facebook by searching CSUN On Point, and follow us on Twitter at CSUN On Point, all one word. This show also appears on our website at csuntvnews.com, or catch us here every Sunday at 4 o'clock. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Eniola Jose.